we'll come back down this way and we'll take a look at this bowl blank. And I've started to prep it. I did a bit of prep yesterday, just looking at it. And we've got our drive tone that we're going to use. I'll talk about that in a minute. The bowl blank is it's a chunk of ash. It's not fully roughed out yet, but it's there somewhat. And it's got a fairly uneven top surface. It's about 8 inches. It's fairly dry. In fact, I'd say it's really dry because it gets a little dusty in here. I've got the center marked, obviously, and just started to rough turn it. So how do I mount bowls like this when they're fairly uneven and stuff like that? I use my Elio-DR Drive that I sell. This is a drive center, number 2 Morse taper, and it's got 3 pins. One is set with a set screw here, and the other 2 are these 1/4x20 screws that have been sharpened to a point. And so with that, we're able to adjust those points to any sort of depth, or adjust for uneven surfaces and stuff like that. So this is what we're going to use. This is a 2.5-inch version. We have and I don't know if I have the smaller one. I do have the large one out here. This is a 3.5-inch version. And then I have, oh, it's stuck behind there. I have a smaller one, a 2-inch version as well. And these are all in the store as well. So that's going to go in the headstock. I will widen this out, and so we can see what's happening in the headstock. And I'm going to orient it sort of vertically. I'm going to take these screw pins and undo them. I have this sticking out probably about 1/2 inch or 5/8 from the face of the faceplate. We'll bring up our tailstock to get ready. What I like to do in lining these up is I'll stick them between this center and this center so that it's not touching these screws. It just helps me balance things. Obviously, I've already got my points set on this already because I rough turned it. So there's 1, 2, and 3. So I know where my center is going at this point. But I'll kind of go through the process that I go through setting this up. So there's my tailstock. So I'll set it like that where it's freely spinning. And let me put this under for a second so we can kind of see and move the camera a little bit more. So you can see it's kind of just spinning on the center pin. It's not even spinning on this is spinning free. So, and that's really just to kind of set it to figure out where I want it to balance. If I want to move the tailstock to balance this out a bit better, when I put it on there, I would take and see how balanced it was this way, and it was fine. It was a little off, but fine. So I try and balance them as much as I can. You can cut some off of the bands how to make that easier. How do I want to orient the pins to the wood here? So one of the great masters I learned from was Alistair. I took a class with him years ago, 2007, 2008, somewhere around there. And he uses the same sort of device, his homemade device. He has lag screws and a big maple disc. And his whole thing is to orient the bowl so that we get this grain pattern, the center of the tree, right at the bottom of the bowl. So if you pretend this was the inside, then you get that grain pattern at the bottom of the bowl and the inside. So he would pivot the bowl blank to make that happen. And so that's why I'll take these growth rings. This is where the pith was here, 180 degrees, it was here. So I'll take that growth ring in the way of the tree, and I'll orient these pins. And I'll move over just slightly. Maybe I'll go this side, it might be easier to see. So there's the 3 pins. I'll orient them so they're in line with the pith. And I'll tighten those 3 pins, just finger tight, or the 2 pins, the 2 screw 1/4x20 screws, and tighten those up just snug with the fingers. And then I'll crank the tailstock down. Lock the tailstock, crank the hand wheel, and embed those screws into there. So now they're lined up with the pith, 180 degrees out from the face grain. And so that's what I like to do, because that way, if I wanted to shift this one way or the other, I've got a pivot plane here that I can pivot against. If I want to shift it this way, I can undo it, move the tailstock, and tighten one screw, loosen off the other one. So the other thing I do is I leave a gap between the faceplate and the bowl blank. I want it to drive on the 3 pins and not the faceplate. I liken it to a 3-legged stool. 3 pins will be enough to drive this thing. If I put it on the faceplate or have it touching the faceplate, I tend to get a bit of a wobble. You can kind of hear it knocking about. So this is plenty enough to drive this bowl.